What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So all last week, there was a ton of talk around Bungie and Destiny 2, but part of that had to do with Naughty Dog and their Last of Us multiplayer that was reportedly put on ice. Well, a director at Naughty Dog actually spoke out, and it appears maybe that multiplayer isn't dead just yet, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a very strange update around that Switch 2 speculation for apparently Super Famicom-themed buttons that starting to look less and less like a coincidence after all. And we'll also be talking about Blizzard. Of course, BlizzCon just happened, but they did discuss the potential for World of Warcraft coming to consoles, and it doesn't necessarily look like it's completely out of the picture. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're gonna start today with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, early access, basically for the campaign launched last week. And well, we got a lot of opinions thrown around online for different outlets on social media about it. And we also had a few reviews go out, one of which certainly brought up quite a bit of discussion because you can see over on OpenCritic, for example, where we have a few, IGN is at the top, a 4 out of 10. And it says underbaked, rehashed, cobbled together from multiplayer parts. Modern Warfare 3 single-player campaign is everything a Call of Duty story mode shouldn't be. Now, we know going into this release that this was kind of like teetering on the edge of just being DLC for Modern Warfare 2, and it still kind of appears that way because you use the launcher for Modern Warfare 2. There were errors that were happening for the PlayStation 5 where they were telling you to put in your Modern Warfare 2 PS4 disc, and some weird stuff going on out there with this game. But I will say the campaign is incredibly underwhelming, and as someone who has enjoyed especially some of the more recent campaigns for Call of Duty, not great, and I'm actually struggling just to even get through it. I'm more looking at playing RoboCop and Star Ocean, two games I'm having a blast with right now, and it's strange to say, but the Call of Duty campaign that's even apparently less than 4 hours, it just feels like a chore to go through with kind of the setup they have. So unfortunate, but I also know only like 5% of people play the campaign, so I'm sure many are looking towards the release of the multiplayer that's happening later this week. Also, speaking of online multiplayer, Fortnite did this thing where they kind of went back in time and basically to where the Battle Royale stuff started for them with the original map, and turns out it was a resounding success for them. So much so they decided to share some of the stats. We could see this post up over on Twitter, where they say, way to start things off with a big bang. We're blown away by the response of Fortnite OG. Yesterday was the biggest day in Fortnite history with over 44.7 million players jumping in 102 million hours of play. That's in a single day, 44.7 million players. And again, just if you're unaware of what this is, they say drop in the original island once again in Fortnite Battle Royale, Chapter 4, Season OG. And as they go along, each major update will bring a different phase of the Battle Royale's past, starting with Chapter 1, Season 5. So interesting stuff that after all this time, all the stuff they've added, just going back to the beginning was enough to apparently have the most successful day ever on Fortnite. It's kind of like, okay, we can go forward and do a Fortnite 2, or we can just hit the reset button and go all the way back. And I feel like a lot of people are thinking, well, I'll wait for it to start all over again with a sequel, or in this case, literally just hitting the reset button. So I think this is something they're just kind of doing temporarily, to my understanding. But either way, it makes you wonder about some of the other live service games that maybe could use a boost. Might not be a bad idea to hit the reset button. Oh, and we do have the PlayStation Portal coming up in about 10 days on the 15th, and it appears that Sony is starting to fill pre-orders, and I assume then ship these things out. I did get an email for it, as of course I'm gonna get one, and we'll take a look at it here on the channel, do the full teardown, but check your email. You should see something like this pop up that just says the payment for your pre-order item will be processed soon, kind of going over your PlayStation Portal order and getting all of that set up and ready to go. So just a reminder, keep an eye out for that. If you did order it, I am very curious to see how it runs through remote play with this, because I'll admit the streaming side for the PS5 was a bit of a surprise with how well it worked. Curious to see if maybe we get some kind of similar effect here using their own hardware for remote play. We'll find out in about 10 days. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Last of Us multiplayer that really the last time we heard about it was that it was put on ice. And this was ongoing from a report, Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, that said that Bungie had made the rounds and basically made judgment calls on if certain live service games that Sony was working on behind the scenes was ready to be shown or had to sort of go back in the oven and get worked on a bit more. I guess Fair Games, Concord, those got the thumbs up, but reportedly, The Last of Us multiplayer, which was going to be like a spinoff of Factions, but I guess larger than that. I was kind of picturing The Division. Well, apparently that wasn't ready for prime time, and they put it back in the oven, and I guess it's still being worked on, because when we hear it's been put on ice, some people are saying it's basically canceled. We figure Naughty Dog has completely moved on from it, because I believe they have, if they're still working on this, 4 different games in development. But this was all started up from this tweet you can see here. This was posted up again. A director at Naughty Dog says Vinit Argawal says, "I did it while it was hard, easily 300 plus. Mario's dead in the process." And so this tweet can live on in peace. Yes, I'm still working on that game. Now, they're the director at Naughty Dog on The Last of Us multiplayer project. So, of course, this exploded online because the going consensus was that game is just out. They've moved on from it completely, which now they're working on there's a new intellectual property they're working on. There's Last of Us Part 3, we believe they're working on, and then that Last of Us Part 2 remaster that's been leaked like 3 times, and I'm kind of expecting them to line that up maybe with the next season for the Last of Us show that they've been streaming that was incredibly popular. Why not put a game next to it? They basically did it with Last of Us Part 1, the remake there, to go along with that. If somebody watched the show and they want to pick that up, great, they can do that. Just look out for the twist, I'm sure, with Season 2. Be very interesting to see how that one turns out with the audience there. But I still think the idea of The Last of Us multiplayer makes sense, even as a separate entity. And I still have a lot of questions around Bungie's decision to shelve it, or at least, again, the reported decision to shelve it. Seems like it's at least still being worked on, according to the director here. So it does make me wonder if maybe that's something that they could spin back up as just a multiplayer mode for Last of Us Part 3, or they do continue to pursue it as a live service game, and maybe they just need to work out the monetization, not necessarily the game itself being a problem. And that's something I figured is the case, because I feel like Naughty Dog would be able to create a good multiplayer game, or just a good game in general, but can they adapt it to the live service setup that, well, now Bungie is just wrestling with for Destiny 2, and it's hard to say what the future of that game, that series, or even that studio looks like right now, based on recent reports of missing revenue by such a large amount. So maybe they looked around and said, hey, we will keep working on this and we'll see what comes of it. But interesting stuff. Definitely something to keep an eye on here as we go forward. But I feel like right now we're probably looking to Naughty Dog to have a new intellectual property, as well as that Last of Us Part 2 remaster set up and ready to go, most likely for 2024, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Next up, let's talk about this odd situation right now with what many believe could be maybe the color themes for the next system, or the Switch 2 from Nintendo, as well as a video that Digital Foundry did, kind of going over the potential capabilities for the next system. But first, we'll start with this tweet that was put out, as someone did notice. They say, per Falcom's store page for Kuro on Switch, something interesting about the UI, another upcoming Switch game with colored buttons that match up with the Super Famicom color scheme. This is from James over on Twitter. And the funniest part about this, I saw in other threads, people looked at it and said, oh, cool, the Xbox color themes. And it's like, okay, well, you can kind of tell maybe who's older in games, who's not, because that is absolutely the Super Famicom color scheme, which I did like the purple gray that we got in the US, but man, if you get a really nice condition Super Famicom controller from the 90s, the buttons just look awesome. It's just I think it looks a lot better as kind of a colorful front rather than just the all purple and gray. But either way, you can kind of see the different buttons here with the theming, and this goes alongside of what we saw with Super Mario RPG that's coming up here in a couple of weeks now. And it also goes along with what we were seeing from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And I'll admit, I saw both of those and I said, that could be just kind of coincidental, or could be Nintendo playing into their past as an Easter egg. Hey, look, we're using the Super Famicom colors. Isn't that fun? But then you see the stuff from Falcom. And of course, now people are just kind of looking out at all these different games for any maybe UI that matches up to this. And there's another one, which you can see the screenshot here. It's for Fashion Dreamer. Okay, well, I mean, yeah, technically the buttons do line up with this, so all right, why not? And what's odd is this is turning into like a third-party thing. It's not just Nintendo doing this, and that's the part that does make me kind of stop for a minute, have some pause. It's like, well, they wouldn't really have a need to do any kind of Easter eggs or callback to the Super Famicom, but at the same time, these are Switch games. Are really led to believe right now that these different third parties are just positioning their games for Nintendo's next system that will have the Super Famicom color combination for their buttons, as well as being completely backwards compatible, which includes their games, Falcom's, as well as Fashion Dreamer. And while I am still kind of leaning towards the idea that this is just coincidental, it is giving me a bit more pause seeing this, like, wow, we're seeing more and more games show up with these UI colors that match up to the Super Famicom, and we are getting closer and closer to when Nintendo should be showing off and talking about the next system if it is indeed launching holiday 2024. I think, like many people believe, it's weird that this stuff would start showing up now. I don't know, like a year before the system comes out. So something to think about there. Leave your best theories, of course, down in the comments. The other thing, though, that got a lot of people talking alongside of these screenshots that were spotted with the UI was Digital Foundry, as they did release this video here, that was all about NVIDIA's T239 processor, which is basically the chip that people believe will be in Nintendo's next system, and this is through all kinds of different Linux updates, distros, like documents within NVIDIA, all kinds of stuff people have been pasting together over the last like 2 years. This kind of falls even back to the Switch Pro stuff. And what they've done is, at Digital Foundry, try to mimic the best they can as to what they believe could be in the Switch 2, and then give us the results from a Dell laptop. And I mean, technically, based on what they showed, it would line up with somewhat with what Nintendo could be putting in the Switch, but there are some things that they obviously can't line up. Like, they're having a hard time lining up the exact amount of video RAM, for example, that could be used here. Any kind of little tricks that NVIDIA will apply, it's gonna be very difficult when you have a Windows laptop from Dell. Like, for example, it could not run the Matrix Awakens demo, and that was part of the rumors and even reports that were out there, is that not only was Nintendo's next system running it, was running it well, to where people were a bit surprised at what they were seeing. But I will say the Dell laptop that they had did run Cyberpunk at 30 frames per second. And the thing with these closed off systems is the developers know exactly what they're working with. And at times, again, NVIDIA can have little tricks applied to it. And Nintendo will be working with them to update the system as they go along to make it more efficient, or just open up the system even further based on developers' feedback for it, to where it would punch well above its weight. We've been here before with Digital Foundry attempting to mimic what the X1, for example, would be able to do ahead of time with Doom, and we actually saw the Switch come in and outperform what Digital Foundry was able to come up with there. So it's just an interesting video, I guess, if you're curious as to, I guess, the most comparable thing based around the going theory of this T239 chip. So make sure you check it out, and then let me know your best thoughts about the Super Famicom Switch 2. Could Nintendo be going back to that color scheme for the buttons, I guess, on the system? And does that mean it could legitimately be called the Nintendo Super? The Super Switch. I do like the the Super Nintendo Switch. That's kind of fun. Next up, let's talk about a game that apparently is so offensive or so bad that Nintendo and Microsoft will not allow it on their store. At least that's according to the developer. But apparently PlayStation will. Let's take a look here. This posted up by VGC, where they say a developer has claimed that it is unable to release its upcoming game on Nintendo and Xbox platforms because the company won't allow it. If you're curious what this game is, it's called Christmas Massacre. It's a PS1 style horror game, again, being released on PlayStation later this month, and they were asked by fans when will it come to other platforms, and they responded saying, no, it's too crazy for Xbox, and no, it's too crazy for Switch. So the game itself, if you look at it, I mean, it doesn't really have any standout things to it necessarily. I mean, it's a PS1 style horror game, and it does look like it's trying to be incredibly offensive, sure. And their previous game is on Xbox and Switch as well as PlayStation, my understanding. It's called Cannibal, so there you go. But in this case, Christmas Massacre, it is exactly what it sounds like, and it's odd to me that after seeing Nintendo's eShop that they would say, nope, this isn't gonna work. The Nintendo's eShop is absolutely ridiculous, and there's no curation to that thing at all. Nintendo's the one company that you probably can slip everything past just about for their eShop. So what I think is going on here is pretty simple. They have their certification for PlayStation. They got that first. So yes, it's coming up here, as they mentioned, on November 17th. And while they either wait for their certification or sure, maybe it got denied for some reason, you say, yeah, it's too much for those other platforms, so that publications and people on YouTube will cover it, and here we are. Now, VGC did say that they had reached out to both Microsoft and Nintendo for comment around this game, and I do wonder if they're going to respond with something like, well, we haven't certified it, or we didn't block this, and then it kind of unravels from there, and you find out that it is coming to the Switch and Xbox maybe to start off next year when they get all of that in order. But I guess if you're curious about Christmas Massacre, it is coming as a PlayStation exclusive at the end of this month, at least for now. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about World of Warcraft, as of course BlizzCon did happen, and it seemed like people were really excited about some of the expansions and the cinematics and stuff that were shown, which made me go, wow, I wish I had followed World of Warcraft at all so I'd have any idea as to what's going on. I will admit, I remember it way back when it first came out, and it is very impressive that it is still going on, but hey, either way, it's a very popular MMORPG that's been through its peaks and valleys, and it appears right now it's certainly peaking online. But there was a question that was posed to the vice president, executive producer for World of Warcraft. That was about the idea of this MMORPG maybe going to consoles, and I assume specifically going to Xbox, as, well, Blizzard is now owned by Microsoft. But this question was posed by GamesRadar, and we can see this posted up over on their website as they were talking with Holly Longdale at BlizzCon 2023 when asked, saying, of course, yeah, we talk about it all the time. Now, when asked about whether it was technical logistics or complexities that would hold World of Warcraft back, maybe coming to console, she says, well, depends on who you ask. I don't think it is, frankly. I think we're pretty well positioned, which is kind of why we talk about it. It's a complicated question, and to your earlier point, for a console audience, the approachability is likely going to be different. Right now, we're focused on the World Soul Saga, but if that comes up, then we'll re-examine things, but man, we've got enough to deal with right now. We've got these 3 expansions, and we are so excited about them, but yeah, of course, it would be very insincere to say that we're not, like, of course, we're talking about that, and then going on to say, we are Microsoft now. Interesting. Now, MMORPGs, I will admit, on console, it's been done many, many times now. Obviously, look at Final Fantasy XIV, incredibly popular on the PlayStation 5, soon to be on the Xbox and on PC. But even myself, I look at MMOs and I go, yeah, that's a PC thing, really. But we've seen more and more of them come over. And I mean, even back in the day, I remember playing Final Fantasy XI on the Xbox 360, and it worked well enough, I guess. It's always, in my mind, it's like, okay, how is this going to sync up to the controller that has a limited amount of inputs compared to, clearly, a keyboard? But we know that you can plug in keyboard and mouse to your consoles now, and it mostly works fine. So yeah, I guess they could work something like that out, or they could legitimately try to figure out how to put all of the World of Warcraft stuff on a controller. And I am curious, people out there who are really into WoW, do you think it would work on a controller? You think they'd be able to figure it out, map it out, so that maybe you hold a trigger down and a bunch of different shortcut keys and stuff come out? Even I'm trying to figure this one out. But I do think it makes a lot of sense at this time, as they say we are Microsoft now. We watched Age of Empires make its way to the Xbox finally as an RTS, but something Microsoft clearly wants to push for Game Pass even on consoles. So why not something as popular as World of Warcraft, get it on the Xbox, even get it on other systems if they want to, like if you get on the Switch or Nintendo's next-gen system, the PlayStation 5, you'll, I'm sure, have an infusion of new players that will work really well for a live service game, an MMORPG like World of Warcraft. But really the question is, can they get it done, and can they handle all the expansions alongside of that? I don't think it's anything that's going to happen anytime soon, but certainly a possibility now, as they mention. they're Microsoft now. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, now that Microsoft has completed the acquisition, do you think Blizzard will bring World of Warcraft to Xbox? Wow, look at this, 61% say yes. In fact, there were a lot of comments that said, hey, you know what, if it comes to console, that's where I'm playing a lot of my games now. I'll try it out. I don't think, by the way, it's going to end up in Game Pass in terms of the subscription. I think that'll be handled separately. But what you would most likely see is something I do see pop up a lot for Phantasy Star is with Game Pass, there's some kind of benefit, whether it's currency or I don't know, some kind of cosmetic or just a weapon or something. I could see that where they try to tie it together that way, but I don't think they're going to take all the money they're making right now from the subscriptions for World of Warcraft and just tie it in to Game Pass. It's just, for them, business-wise, doesn't make sense. But them getting it on console, I do think makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see that in a couple of years. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Dragoon, who says, very concerned for Sony's future. They bought Bungie to assist Sony with their live service games push, and now not even Bungie is succeeding as much in this field. Does not bode well for Sony's future output of titles. I expect titles like Concord and Fair Games to be dead in less than a year. I don't personally care for multiplayer games, but they've clearly devoted a lot of resources to these upcoming titles. Guess time will tell if it pays off. So first of all, with Fair Games, Concord, I think we got to see those games before we completely write them off as, okay, this is just not going to work. But then beyond that, I really think Sony right now, they just need to regroup 2024 to start off with a showcase because they're still selling hardware. The PS5 console is still rolling along. There's a bundle for Call of Duty, which I just said I don't really like the campaign much, but it's Call of Duty. It's going to sell well, especially for the multiplayer side of things. And the fact that you get a PS5 Slim model and it comes with the game, there's going to be a lot of people in the mainstream who are buying that maybe as gifts for the holidays. So they'll have another surge of hardware that sells. Just get together for a showcase, show off games even that are not coming out for 3 years or so, because there's just a lot of mystery as to what is happening for Sony going forward here as we're almost at the halfway point of the PS5 generation. So if you gotta tap Sucker Punch and show off their game now, Blue Point, Sony Santa Monica, apparently they have a new IP, Naughty Dog with their new IP, their Ben Studio. There are, of course, studios they can go to just to show what's happening, even if it's not coming out in the immediate future. And I'm sure they also have a bunch of third-party deals that are just about ready to be shown as well. So I do think there's a lot of stuff they can come to the table with and kind of get people to relax a bit, but I'll admit right now, even I'm kind of scratching my head as to what Sony is going to do here as we go into the new year. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whereas apparently The Last of Us multiplayer not put on ice. It's still being worked on, but when do you think it'll come out, and how do you think it'll come out? And then also, what about the situation of Nintendo and these Super Famicom themed buttons that keep showing up? Is it coincidence, or maybe is it something we're gonna see here in the future with their next gen device? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.